Hello there.
The cinema courtroom is now in session.
Ladies and gentlemen of the jury, welcome back to the Cinema Courtroom Show, a podcast where your favorite blockbusters await trial with your host and galactic judge, Makram Mark. Do not forget to like and subscribe on whatever, and I mean whatever, streaming platform that you're just listening to. It can be Spotify or Stitcher, Google Podcasts, Amazon Music, or, even better, the Cinema Courtroom YouTube channel, where you might also gain access to exclusive video coverage, because every click on the icon counts. So don't forget to ring the notification bell and share this podcast with your friends, family, cat, dog, pigeon, whomever, if you want to keep seeing ad-free content, free of charge. Now, without further ado, let us begin with our review topic. Weird, the Yankovic Story, starring Daniel Radcliffe. Take a listen. Weird Al is what I like to call an experimental artist who comes up with very, genius and inventive parodies. My favorite parody from him of all time is the lyrical adaptation of American Pie, titled The Saga Begins, where he basically breaks down the beginning to end of Star Wars The Phantom Menace into one single track. So, I mean, there's that, and I love it. You know, Weird Al, I think, is the best parody artist to have ever existed on planet Earth. Hands down. Okay, so you might be wondering what my thoughts are on Roku's latest biopicture, which is centered on none other than Weird Al Yankovic. I conceive the Al Yankovic story as an entertaining spectacle. It is filled with laughter. Sure, it might feel a little ridiculous at times, but it contains some exceptionally executed twists and turns. And more importantly, I think that this movie might have a chance of competing with Bohemian Rhapsody. Yup, you heard me. So stay tuned for the final verdict in regards to that comparison to, yes, Bohemian Rhapsody, as well as my full insights on this Weird Al movie. Daniel Radcliffe was the impeccable casting choice for Alfred Matthew, otherwise known as, of course, Weird Al in a Weird Al biopicture. So, anyway, the Al Yankovic Story is a movie that, I'm not sure if it's because he has played another character from another franchise with glasses. You know the one that I'm talking about. But the thing about Weird Al, the Al Yankovic Story, when it comes to the acting and Daniel Radcliffe, the critics weren't lying whenever they made the assertion that Daniel Radcliffe gave it his all in this movie. A scene that I enjoyed very much in particular was when Dr. Demento gave him LSD. And even though it's probably not accurate, because the inaccurate story elements is kind of the selling point for this bio picture, which I will get into more of in just a second. But that moment was perfectly executed. And Daniel Radcliffe's facial expressions, the visual effects for the lightning scene, everything about that was brilliantly executed and weird. Although not perfect, it's almost as if Daniel Radcliffe is the only suitable choice for Weird Al. If I were to introduce someone to his picture, I would offer them the following disclaimer. This movie is a parody in that of itself, and reflects the true spirit and, in my opinion, sheer talent and brilliance of Weird Al Yankovic. It's almost like with every bizarre twist and turn, where they actually killed off Weird Al at the end of the movie, it feels like we're inside the chaotic mess which is the confines of Weird Al Yankovic's conscious. And his mind is so artistic, because I don't know if that was meant to be a metaphor of Weird Al's weird perception of life, get it? Or the end of life? Because maybe he doesn't want to live anymore. Who knows? Although at times, I thought that the mafia group holding Madonna hostage and Weird Al rescuing her with guns blazing out of a western was overextended at times. I will have to take some points from the movie for that. But I still think that the movie was brilliantly executed, and it served as a good catharsis for Weird Al's character arc in the movie. Yet, it pulled me out of the movie in a funny way, because every time we see the guns blazing and, Madonna being captured, it left me scratching my head. What on earth happened to this biopic? What have you done, writers? This is not how I imagined it from the start, This obviously, none of what had happened in the third act of the movie, or most of it, that didn't happen. But regardless, the twists and turns that the writers incorporate into this, pot of a movie, elevate what Weird Al Yankovic Story is attempting to be, as a musical biopic. Oh, and I thought the twist where Michael Jackson's Beat It was a ripoff of Eat It, that was the funniest twist that came out of this movie. Hands down. Because, when I was watching it, I was like, hold on a minute. Didn't Beat It come first? What? And then I was like, oh, okay. They're not going to tell us. They're not going to correct us on the trivia behind Eat It. They expect us to know already, or maybe they actually want to deliberately lie to, people who are just getting introduced to Weird Al for the first time. So then they may actually think that Eat It came first. I don't know what that twist was meant to be, but it was freaking hilarious. Okay, what about the movie's comedy in general? We want you to give up on the things that you love and work in a factory. I'm not sure if that piece of dialogue was meant to be satire or horrendous dialogue on purpose, but whatever that scene tried to be in the moment, it landed. Moments like the scene that I had just mentioned are a testament to how comedic and endearing the Weird Al Yankovic Story is as a motion picture overall. I am quite let down that Weird Al Yankovic Story didn't receive the theatrical release that it so much deserved, and it just went straight to television streaming. I mean, why was that? Why wouldn't you give people the opportunity to watch Weird Al Yankovic Story for the first time on a screen that's bigger than our phones, tablets, TVs, laptops? Because, there's no question that the budget, as I've already discussed when it came to Weird Al's LSD moment, lightning and all that, it's something that should be viewed in the cinema. In IMAX, 4DX, or 3D even. No glasses 3D. I don't know, maybe if that technology actually gets implemented in the cinema. Fingers crossed. I digress to say that the reason I think that this should all be a reality is because most of the comedy in this movie lands perfectly. And imagine just sitting next to a live audience and hearing them laugh at every bizarre moment that is being depicted in this Weird Al movie. And also, just a little side insight about what I plan to do later down the road. Whenever I construct a theater room, when I get the money for it, in the next life that is, Weird Al Yankovic movie is going to be one of those pictures where I'm just going to play it there, in an attempt to try and replicate the theatrical experience that I think, in my opinion, should have just been had with this movie. Or at least I hope I can pull it off. Who knows? Again, I'll update you in the distant future where that inevitably happens. Now, before I wrap up this review with the finalized verdict, I want to compare Weird Al Yankovic Story to one of many musical biopics, Bohemian Rhapsody. And the reason that I want to do that is because A, I am going to reveal whether or not Bohemian Rhapsody will remain in my number one musical biopic of all time, or if Weird Al might just beat it. And B, Does Weird, the Al Yankovic Story, carry the same level of impact that Bohemian Rhapsody had to the audience? Let's find out. For one, the Queen band is my favorite one when it comes to the rock genre. So even before Bohemian Rhapsody came out, I immediately thought to myself, that's my movie. And when I watched the movie, judging based on what I, seen from the trailers, and then putting that aside, I liked the final product. Like, so many times that I still rewatch Bohemian Rhapsody at least 3 times a year, if not more. Heck, I might want to watch Bohemian Rhapsody again, right now. But after I finish recording this podcast. I digress to say that Weird, the Al Yankovic Story, also features an artist who I listen to quite regularly. And I'm pretty sure that the majority do as well. I mean, most of us listen to Weird Al. But maybe that's why you're clicking this review. Maybe you want to see, or hear what my thoughts are on not only Weird Al, but how he's being portrayed in a biographical picture that's meant to be a parody. So, this is a really hard comparison to make, and the more I think about it, and don't get me wrong, Weird the Al Yankovic Story is getting more than enough praises from me at this point. I will humbly put Weird the Al Yankovic Story in, drumroll please, second place. And then I'm going to keep Bohemian Rhapsody as my number 1 biopicture. I think that the runtime leans more in Bohemian Rhapsody's favor, because, in my opinion, Bohemian Rhapsody is 2 hours and 40 minutes, whereas Weird is only over an hour, but nothing more. It's barely 2 hours. And that's not hating on the movie or anything. On the contrary, I actually love Weird the Al Yankovic Story. That's why I want to make this review. I just want to let you know that I love it. And I'm quite let down that we didn't get more. But hey, it is what it is. But how about Grounds B? Does Weird carry the same impact as Bohemian Rhapsody? For this criteria, I'm not going to put one over the other. Instead, I'll say that Weird, the Al Yankovic Story, and Bohemian Rhapsody have equal impact when it comes to the movie-going experience. Because you must understand that both movies have something unique to offer when it comes to the person's backstory and upbringing in a biographical picture. Freddie Mercury grew up a Zoroastrian. I hope I pronounced the religion right. Chances are I didn't, in which case I apologize in advance. And Alfred Matthew grew up in an Amish-raised family in this movie as well. Hence the inspiration for Amish Paradise. And I know, you're gonna say that I let this parody format of the movie fly over my head, but I am genuinely asking, is it true that Weird Al was Amish? I honestly never read about his childhood. And, I don't know his early life. I don't know how he was when he was a teenager, an adult. I don't know any of that jazz. But maybe you guys can let me know in the comment section below. And I will shout you out, obviously, because it would be a real big help for me if you just, delight me with your knowledge. But anyway, we can see that the Bohemian Rhapsody movie and Weird, the Al Yankovic Story, utilizes the character's upbringing as a contributing factor to rocket boosting the plot. In Bohemian Rhapsody, Freddie's father explains how their family had to leave Zanzibar with nothing. Not Zanzibar. Zanzibar. I think that's how you pronounce it. Maybe I pronounced it right the first time. Whatever. They had to leave with nothing but the clothes on their back, which explained why Freddie ended up in the United Kingdom, and as a result of this butterfly effect, he met the band Queen. The rest is how it went up to Live Aid. It's history. And we can see that in Weird the Al Yankovic Story. Al is dealing with an internal crisis. He needs a song to perform ASAP. It's almost a life or death situation. Literally, because he does die in the end. And his father, who was tough on him in the beginning of the movie, abusive even. Then he had his redeeming moment where he explained why he himself abandoned his dream to play the accordion. Because it was considered a sin. And because he played the accordion, he was considered an outcast by all the other Amish people. Therefore, out of, what he perceived as love, he didn't want his son to be outcasted as well. That's why he smashed his accordion and never let him play it in the house. Or if he found out that he played it outside of the house, he was going to be sure that he didn't hear the end of it. But then, the writers do something with Weird Al's family background that I didn't quite anticipate. But frankly, I was like, okay now, that makes sense. So anyway, the writers made it so that in the screenplay, the Amish Paradise song was inspired by the social and cultural element of the Amish society in the very end of the movie. I loved that. I think as far as how they're portrayed in the movie, this is what you call true representation, ladies and gentlemen. Weird Al Yankovic Story is entertaining, a well-done parody, well-executed and bizarre twists and turns that just leave you gaping. And more importantly, Daniel Radcliffe plays Weird Al very exceptionally, which reveals to anyone who followed him through his acting career that he can indeed put Harry Potter behind him and move forward. And I think that Weird Al Yankovic Story is just a means to the beginning of such a fruitful career. And now, we finally begin to approach the second half of the Cinema Courtroom Show, which is the post-sentencing hearing. What is the post-sentencing hearing, you may ask? Well, I'm rather glad you inquired about this to begin with, because in the first half of the Cinema Courtroom podcast, we reviewed Weird, the Al Yankovic Story, which is one of many films that I select, whether they be old and new, or big and small, underrated and overrated, the broken and the damned, black, white, brown, orange, and blue. Then, in the second half of the show, I assemble all of the leftover topics that pertain to the film industry in general, movie news, and movie-relevant subject matters that aren't just limited to one specific movie, and integrated into one post-sentencing hearing list. Think of it as an after-party that is long overdue, where you, yes you, the awesome listeners tuning in on Spotify, Stitcher, Google Podcasts, Amazon Music, or the Cinema Courtroom YouTube channel, are invited, or in judiciary terms, an invitation to a retrial in order to rectify an unfair hearing. Because sometimes, like the organic sapient that I find myself to be, I find that I've been too critically generous or harsh about a movie. So the majority of the time, my opinions do change after a rewatch or two, which means I'm compelled to review the movie again in a post-sentencing hearing. If you listen this far into the Cinema Courtroom Show, then I salute you for sticking around to the second half. If you enjoy what you've heard in the first half and what I'm about to say in the second half of the Cinema Courtroom Show, if you haven't done so already and you'd feel so inclined, I would very much appreciate it if you give this podcast a reshare and like this episode by clicking the thumbs up or heart icon on, again, whatever platform that you're listening on. Spotify, Stitcher, Google Podcasts, Amazon, or YouTube. This way, you will be supporting the Cinema Courtroom as well as its future episodes, installments, and assets. That being said, I salute you in advance for your generous engagement and support, and I hope you continue to join us in the ride to success. In this hearing, we are going to cover the following: Quentin Tarantino's list of perfect movies. That should be very interesting. Why Glass Onion is different from Knives Out, and the first reviews for Black Panther 2, Wakanda Forever. Enjoy. There's no one I respect more in the film industry than these three people. Well, actually, four people, because the Russo brothers are on that short list of people. And, well, they're technically two people, of course. But my top two directors before the Russo brothers are Christopher Nolan, who directed my favorite sci-fi movie of all time, Interstellar, which I'm going to review in the near future, and Quentin Tarantino, especially Quentin Tarantino. Now, that doesn't mean I like him more or less than other movie directors. Christopher Nolan is still my number one, but to me, Quentin Tarantino is a first-rate motion picture artist. Period. Like, that's just how me and a majority of film connoisseurs perceive him as. And before I properly begin with this segment, and I will get to it, I promise, but I want to first get into how Quentin Tarantino, in a way, reignited my passion for movies, and why I do a weekly podcast show about movies and the cinema industry twice a week. 3 years back, Quentin Tarantino conversed about his inspiration for a movie that he directed called Reservoir Dogs, which was released in 1992. In that 10-minute video where he talked about Reservoir Dogs, he said something that I still remember until this day. You don't have to know how to make a movie. If you truly love cinema with all your heart and with enough passion, you can't help but make a good movie. So what he's essentially saying is that you don't have to go to film school. But I mean, it would still be nice to go there. But that's not the point. Going to film school is useless if you don't love cinema with every fiber of your being. Because let's say you direct a movie that you're not really passionate about. And unfortunately, we saw this with the Star Wars sequels. Then the product is going to end up being stale, like mediocre, and the quality is going to be half-assed because the love for the product ain't there. That's why a director like Quentin Tarantino saying those words is very relieving, because there are movie chefs out there who care about the movies that they cook. It should go without saying that Quentin Tarantino's insights are of significant value to me, as you are now aware, which doesn't mean that I always agree with him, but it puts any movie into perspective. Now, let's say Quentin Tarantino likes cats, and this is just a hypothetical scenario that I completely made up, mind you. Anyone who likes cats is like getting a number one haircut. They're asking to get ridiculed. I just want to get that out of the way, okay? You know, I would then look at the awful movie Cats and go, you know what? Maybe Cats isn't that bad because Tarantino, the movie pope, liked it. He said that it was a masterpiece. Again, Tarantino never said this. Please don't get that wrong impression. Tarantino doesn't like cats. He doesn't. Just no, okay? Because again, I made it up. My point is that, I think that it's fascinating to read what a filmmaker with a substantial, experience has to say about movies. Now, without further ado, let's get into part 2 of this segment, where I am going to go over Quentin Tarantino's list of perfect movies, which he had revealed the other day on Jimmy Kimmel Live. If you're keen on listening to all of them, then, keep listening to this podcast, because I am going to go over Quentin Tarantino's whole list. Or better yet, if you want to hear Quentin Tarantino go over those movies himself, then just search up Jimmy Kimmel, and I'm sure that you're going to find it there. The first movie on Quentin Tarantino's list of 7 is The Texas Chainsaw Massacre, directed by Tobe Hooper. While this movie is relatively low when it comes to the production budget, it is known by movie pundits as having a very satisfying ending at its possession, and teenagers having to go through insane events with jump scares. Very fancy choice, Quentin Tarantino. Next on Quentin Tarantino's list is The Wild Bunch, directed by Sam Peckinpah. I looked at the Google reviews for it just now, and a user called Dave Morris says that it's very realistic, something that earlier movies have been lacking. We also have James Turner, who also mentioned on Google Reviews that it is one of their favorite films. Catherine Gregory even made the assertion that it's the best Western ever made. So, there's that. The next and third picture on Tarantino's catalog of perfect movies is Young Frankenstein. Screen Rant pointed out that Young Frankenstein might contain silly humor at times, but Mel Brooks, the director of the movie, nailed the old school horror design. Another movie that Quentin Tarantino has on his list is Annie Hall. Many critics think that Annie Hall is a charming spectacle, but to other movie pundits, it's a take it or leave it kind of film. We have, of course, The Exorcist coming up on Quentin Tarantino's list. It is definitely, without a doubt, and in my humble opinion, that The Exorcist is the highest grossing horror movie of all time. Why I decided to review Smile for our Halloween special this year instead of this one, I will never know. I might review The Exorcist in the near future though, so keep on the lookout for that. But for now, all you have to do is prepare yourself for my Black Panther Wakanda Forever review coming this Tuesday. I'm sorry guys, but I couldn't resist an opportunity to add a shameless plug, but no, seriously. I watched Black Panther already. I probably put up an out-of-theater reaction, so that should give you a quick tease of what my overall thoughts of the movie are. Moving on, we have Jaws. Who knew that a giant white shark torturing residents of an island would have so much appeal for a guy like Quentin Tarantino? I mean, hey, I don't blame him. He directed Inglourious Basterds. He is capable of viewing and directing cruel things. Anyways, we're pretty much at the end now of Quentin Tarantino's list. We have Back to the Future with brilliant and funny exposition all around. This movie's an instant classic, but you don't need me or Quentin Tarantino to make that assertion. Watch Back to the Future for yourself, and I'll give it a 9 out of 10 chance that you're going to come back with your faith restored in films. Ladies and gentlemen of the jury, this is Quentin Tarantino's list of perfect movies which we got to explore in this segment of the Cinema Courtroom post-sentencing hearing show. What do you think about Quentin Tarantino's selection of perfect movies? Do you think that they're just? Do you think that perhaps you might disagree with any of them? Whatever your thoughts are, let me know in the comment section below or our Twitter inbox at Cinema Courtroom. A new trailer for Glass Onion, a Knives Out mystery, just came out. And while I think that trailer is really good, because it did what a trailer is always meant to do, increase my hype for the programming, Rian Johnson, the director of Knives Out, has a few things to say in regards to why Glass Onion is different from Knives. And I quote him in the following line. I wanted to establish right off the bat that every single movie is going to be a very different animal. Each one of them must have its own reason for being and its own theme. It's not just repeating a formula, but using this genre to create a whole new formula every time. Sometimes, with series or sequels, it can become weird, stratified, fossilized from the previous movies. The fun thing to me is genuinely creating something fresh and new. Alright, well, I mean, Rian Johnson is kind of known for doing exotic sequels. Even if they end up to be utterly garbage like Star Wars The Last Jedi. I mean, that movie was shit. I still can't forgive him for this atrocity, by the way. So, there's that. But he's not talking about a Star Wars sequel in the statement. He's talking about Knives Out, which I fully contend is one of the best whodunit murder mystery genre pictures of the year that it was released in. And possibly, and it's a big possibility, mind you, not a certainty, don't twist what I'm about to say, it's the best murder mystery of all time. Now, the prospect of Glass Onion being different from Knives Out is good in my opinion, because the very reason that I enjoyed the first Knives Out installment to begin with is because of the idea that it was different from any mystery that we've seen before from other movies. Like, Glass Onion being different is pretty much part of Knives Out core DNA. And, whenever you talk about, different, especially in Knives Out, they make the killer obvious. Like, we knew it was Chris Evans. But sometimes it's almost too obvious that we, as the average moviegoer, doubt that's who it is. But then, the so-called obvious killer is revealed, and it actually makes sense. They don't pull a random, rabbit out of the hat. It makes sense to the story. It elevates the story. And we are already acquainted, by who the killer's motives are. By the third act, And overall, I cannot wait to see how different Glass Onion is from Knives Out when it comes out on Netflix, November 23rd, 2022, and in limited theatrical chains. What do you think about what Rian Johnson said about Glass Onion being different from Knives Out? Do you perceive that maybe Glass Onion shouldn't be all that different and unique? And do you think that Knives Out should be utilized as more of a template? Because after all, if it ain't broke, then don't fix it. Do you think otherwise? Whatever your thoughts are, let me know in the comment section below or our Twitter inbox at Cinema Courtroom. To finish off this post-sentencing hearing, considering that I watched Wakanda Forever just yesterday, which, by the way, you can check out my out of the theater reaction for Wakanda Forever right under my YouTube shorts. No spoilers, of course. You're just going to hear my candid thoughts and facial expressions. So there's that. And, we are going to be reviewing Wakanda Forever this Tuesday anyway. I thought, what better way to maintain the Black Panther spirit than going over existing non-spoiler reviews for the movie. Now, keep in mind, before I proceed with this segment, Wakanda Forever, as of today, Friday, November 11th, 2022, has already come out yesterday in most places around the globe. And if you're listening to this podcast while you're on your way to the cinema, mall, or wherever to watch it, because I can't imagine that there are a vast majority who just want to go, call dibs on the seats already, right? Then maybe it's best to cleanse your mind from any negative or positive review that I might read and put this podcast aside. Go enjoy yourselves. Don't worry, you already gave me your click. Actually, no, just kidding. Just pause this episode, like it if you're, enjoying what you're hearing so far, and then unpause it again after you're done watching Black Panther, if you're going to watch it now. To everyone else who isn't going to see the movie at this particular point of time or straight away, stick around, because I think that it's, always good to hear others' perspectives that might elevate your hype a bit. Now, let's read what the MCU Direct has to say. So it begins with a quote, "In my culture, death is not the end." And it was posted by Matt on November 8th, 2022. Okay, let's start reading. Black Panther Wakanda Forever was never originally supposed to be the movie it ended up becoming. After the tragic passing of MCU icon Chadwick Boseman, this movie needed to become something more than a sequel to Black Panther, a billion-dollar phenomenon that revolutionized the genre. Ryan Coogler and his team were challenged to deliver a movie that pays tribute to their fallen leading man while also evolving this franchise to continue in his honor. And they had just done that. Okay, you know what? Let's just scroll down. The loss of a king, the rise of a nation. Alright. Let's talk about what the direct has to say about the performances. I'm not going to read the whole article, obviously. So, continuing on. This movie does an outstanding job of handling this real-world loss with love and thoughtfulness. At the same time, Letitia Wright uses that motivation to bring Shuri into a new tier of MCU heroes. This is a must-see performance on screen and in the writer's room. Shuri and her family's loss is the heart of the story. It is driven by this conflict between land and sea that brings tension to to every scene. The first Black Panther has hints of espionage that can go unnoticed behind the Spielbergian conceptualization of Wakanda. It is back in Wakanda Forever with a classic spy movie sequel twist, an enemy that can go toe-to-toe with Wakanda. With Wakanda. This balance of emotional weight and intensity-ridden suspense creates a complex tone that does not surrender to the classic MCU charm. There is a Captain America the Winter Soldier vibe in this one that Phase 4 has lacked thus far. Okay, let's go over one more category. A Wakandan blockbuster. Interesting that I mentioned that, because, it's not just any blockbuster, it's a Wakandan one. So, cathartic, emotional journeys, intimidating invasive threats, and a whole lot of whiz-bang to go along with it. This movie does not lack that MCU touch that many believe Eternals did. It simply redirects the action of the movie. It's interesting how the direct wants to utilize Eternals as an example to substantiate a category in the article, because I think the Eternals, one of its strengths, even though it's like on my top 5 least MCU films, was that it didn't rely on the MCU touch. It tried to be a isolated picture. So, it's interesting how, according to this article's perception, Mike, is that his name? I believe I read it in the beginning of, Matt. Yeah, sorry, I forgot the name of whoever written this article. But, I don't think a movie that lacks the MCU touch is necessarily a bad movie. Now, Wakanda Forever is filled with MCU formula spins, but it okay, I'm not gonna elaborate on that. Continuing on, the story is more serious and heartbreaking than most MCU films. That's true, but it is cut of a range of action sequences that bring the popcorn. That's also true. This includes intense and energetic chase scenes, massive set-piece battles between powerful armies, and a climatic final battle where every punch means something. Adding a great deal to this energy is Dominique Thorne's Riri Williams, aka Ironheart, the newest addition to the MCU roster of heroes. Thorne brings that classic audience perspective into this world, while still holding her own in every respect. With her new series set to release in fall 2023, this is an excellent debut that will get fans excited for more Riri. Another dash of MCU-ness is the world building, both big and small. Without getting into spoilers, let's just say that Wakanda is set to continue being a major piece in the game of chess being played in MCU. As the article said, it's not getting into any spoilers, neither am I going to elaborate on what they mentioned in this article. Despite the sometimes polarizing reaction to the product that is Phase 4, Black Panther Wakanda Forever continues to excel at what Phase 4 has done best: characters. Okay, you know what? Let's get into the last line of the article. Chadwick Boseman's death is honored without question, but what honors him even more is the evolution of this franchise and how the words Wakanda Forever will continue to ring throughout fandom for years to come. Okay, guys, so we're done reading the direct. The direct, based on the review article, gave Wakanda Forever a mostly positive review. And by the way, I'm just going to remind you again, I myself watched the movie, okay? And you're going to hear my in-depth, spoiler-free and spoiler-filled commentary this coming Tuesday at 5:29 p.m. Dubai Standard Time. On top of that, the live chat will be open where you can engage with other listeners about the movie. If you're dying to hear my first impressions immediately, and I mentioned this before, like 2 times in this podcast already, I did a YouTube short, which is titled Wakanda Forever out of theater reaction for the Black Panther 2 movie. So you can, check it out on YouTube. Alright, now it's time to get into another review for Wakanda Forever. And this time, it's coming from none other than 7GN, ladies and gentlemen. That was a joke, by the way, because IGN always likes to give a 7 out of 10 in a majority of the reviews. Not all of them, but most. I don't know how they do it, you guys, but anyway, let's read your review article, shall we? Okay, so let's read from IGN. In the cinematic universe, where half of all living beings have already died and come back to life, Black Panther Wakanda Forever reminds us that losing one person can feel just as devastating. The death of T'Challa and actor Chadwick Boseman weighs heavy on Wakanda Forever, with the fictional nation struggling to replace both their monarch and their champion, and Marvel Studios deciding how to honor a man it was clearly ready to work with. Everyone in Shuri's life is urging her to let T'Challa go, and her tendency to lash out in those cases goes a long way towards grounding Wakanda Forever during its frequent flights of fancy. It's a sharp about face, but Wright's emotional, and intensity carry Shuri through that fraught grieving process. Director Ryan Coogler builds Shuri's slide into despair up to one of Wakanda's most jaw-dropping scenes, an unbearably tense moment of self-reflection that serves as a reminder that the well-deployed exchange between two characters can be just as breathtaking as a grand battle for the fate of two nations. Okay then, let's talk about one more review and then let's just call it a night. This one is coming from Collider. So we're going to read that and then we're going to wrap up our Wakanda Forever review segment. At the beginning of Wakanda Forever, we find the title country in grief, shocked by the passing of their king. And in these moments, it's hard not to think back to when Boseman died, a shock that seemed like it couldn't be true. I thought it was a joke. So I was just like, okay, maybe I should just check out the post. And then when I found out that Chadwick Boseman died from his illness, man, I honestly couldn't comprehend it. It felt unreal. So, if they planned for Black Panther to die from the very beginning in Wakanda Forever, clearly it would have been too rushed to make him die in the second movie. But they had no choice. Well, they could have recast him, but that's a discussion for another time. Okay. That was obviously not scripted, but it's best that you know my thought process when I look at reviews for the movie. I've looked at some of them before I watched Wakanda Forever, and in a way, it kind of gave me a little taste of what I was going in for. So, there's that. Alright, ladies and gentlemen, that just about does it for our Wakanda review segment. If you're eagerly waiting to hear mine, which is going to be a lot more structured, because I won't be reading it off from somewhere. It's going to be from my own head. You know what? One could argue my head ain't structured, but it's pure chaos in there. Anyway, you can either click our YouTube channel and find my out-of-theater reaction, or turn on your notifications, wait until Tuesday where we'll be talking about Wakanda Forever in more depth. But in the meantime, I would be interested in reading your thoughts, if any, about Wakanda Forever. We have now reached the threshold of the cinema Courtroom show. Thank you for tuning in to this podcast, where we critique movies. I had a lot of fun doing this podcast, so be sure to subscribe if you enjoyed the 24th episode of the Cinema Courtroom Show. I hope to see you guys again in the next episode, where we're going to talk about, yet again, another movie. Black Panther Wakanda Forever. Catch my review for Black Panther Wakanda Forever when the next and 25th episode of the Cinema Courtroom Show launches this coming Tuesday on YouTube, Spotify, Stitcher, Google Podcasts, Anchor, and the Amazon Music platform. Thank you once again for listening till the end. I am your Galactic Judge Mark, and I hope you have a spectacular day.
Hello there.
Court is now dismissed.